Good morning, my learned friends. My name is Ejime Oghenefejiro. Um, I'm actually an associate lecturer at the University of Salford. It has actually been a great year for me because I just started lecturing this year under the tutelage of Dr. Zishan and Professor Raso. So, my colleague here, we actually doing a research and we stumble on we have us all be talking about corruption in Africa, but we are too deep in talking about corruption. There are things that we are not looking at. That's why we say like, okay, there are things that lead into things that are actually even more deadlier than corruption, which are where we come up with the natural disaster and economic performance, the evidence of Mozambique from the year 2000 to 2024. So most of us will actually ask, why Mozambique? Yeah. So when we pick up the topic like, why Mozambique? We say that, okay, if when you look at the landscape of Africa, Mozambique is actually on a very large coastal line that when you look at it properly, the coastal line are not protected, which can happen to like in terms of flood and erosion actually taking the country apart. Looking at even from the poor nature of how the economy and the country is being run. So some of the major exposure events that have actually happened in Mozambique are the Ida and the Kenneth disaster. From statistics, the first one that happened, which is the Ida, impacted about 3 million people, which actually have a devastating effect on the economy that is actually not even good. Imagine taking 13% out of an economy that is not even there. So then again, in a week later, Kenneth affected about 400,000 people. We have 3 million people already in problem. 400 million joined the following week. Think of it as a leader, as a president, or it can be devastating to even you, not even people that is affecting. On a larger scale, when we were looking at the research, we saw that what was not affected was actually not just the life of people, but we're actually basic infrastructure that is not even there, that people are actually managing. Then when we were actually dealing on the research, we dig a bit not too deep because it's always there. Because in previous research, when we look, we saw a gap that, everybody, when people talk, researchers write about disaster all over the world, they combine the whole topic together. But we say, why don't we look at it on a specific angle targeted towards Mozambique? That was where our research gap and our research question actually came from. Then our data basically we actually sourced not too hard because it's always there. When you check the EMD data, then the World Bank WDI, where we got most of the data from. And luckily, the Bank of Mozambique actually have most of the publication of the data, people that were affected, because through their SOCs, they actually presented the low effect of how or the output of what comes from the economy. Then our variable were actually really easy for us to actually assess because we actually got the GDP from the WDI. Then again, the inflation also we actually got it from the WDI. Then when we look at the conceptual pathway, when there is a disaster, there is a shock in economy, it falls down to infrastructure. When infrastructure have a shake, it forces onward decline in production. GDP will have nothing to rely on. So when when we look at it from a more trajectory pathway, the disaster have a whole lot of weight on the economy that was not even present there. So my friend will take the econometrics model.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Eleje Emmanuel. I'm from the University of Salford. This topic is very critical because when you talk about climate change, it's pointing towards what we're discussing. And our focus is on Mozambique. Mozambique has been classified by the UN as being the most disastrous-prone country in sub-Saharan African country. So that piqued our interest on why we chose Mozambique. For the methodology, we adopted a simple method just to analyze and bring awareness about these issues. We used is a quantitative study and also a time series that captures the dynamic interaction between disaster shock, microeconomic indicator, and growth outcomes from 2000 to 2024. So the OLS approach was used. Prior before that, we also did some pre-test, and we used the ADF test. For the ADF test, we discovered that the L affected, as stated there, it means the lag number of people affected by disaster. We found stationarity at first difference, and for GDP and inflation rates, we found the stationarity at levels. For the diagnostic, we also went further to do some diagnostic tests to check for the reliability and the suitability of our data. We used the Brush, Pagan, Godfrey approach, and COSOM test was also adopted. If you go down to our findings, we discovered the first finding, the lag affected, is in line with our a priori expectations. We were expecting the result, and it came out that way. For the number of people affected by disaster, we discovered that we found a negative and significant impact on economic growth, which simply implies that as the number of people affected by disaster increases, economic activities is being impacted, to say. For inflation, we also discovered it moved away from our a priori expectation. We discovered we got a positive and non-significant impact. The general implication of our findings is simple. In Mozambique, growth fluctuations are drawn more from structural shock linked to natural disaster than short-term price instability. This issue is very critical. When you mention Mozambique, I'm from Nigeria, and the question is, why am I researching about Mozambique? Like we said, based on our investigation, Mozambique is among the most affected in disaster-prone country in Africa. For our recommendation for this study, because it's very critical, we recommend, our first recommendation is that the government in Mozambique must strengthen climate resilient infrastructure. And also, they need to improve early warning disaster response. Thirdly, government needs to diversify its economy, spread the economy abroad. And lastly, expand social protection. This is very critical because the reoccurrence of this disaster issue may tend to lead to a lot of losses for individuals within the state and businesses within the state, which tend to affect the GDP of that country. So government needs to provide a protection plan for the people within that environment or within this or with affected people within that place. In terms of cash transfer, insurance companies can also play a significant role in order for them to recover part or full fund lost as a result of this disaster. Thank you very much. And any other question would like to respond from me?